All right, Jim, we're back with a special guest.
We are back, and we have a special guest this week. Let's introduce our guest first before we do what you're reading. So this week we have Todd McGowan, who teaches in the Department of English at the University of Vermont. Right, did his PhD at Ohio State. I think it's fair to say film theory, philosophy, and psychoanalysis are all your teaching, writing wheelhouse. Is that right, Todd?
Sure.
I'm going to try to embarrass Todd as little as possible with like laying out the amount of important work he's done, but he's done a lot of very important work, and we're really lucky to have him. You can find a lot of things that Todd's written in film, in psychoanalysis, in politics and culture. I think the two books that we'll mention for our audience that are probably most important is Todd's 2019 book, Emancipation After Hegel, which is a book I'll say awoke me from my Brandomian slumbers. Okay, so really changed how I read Hegel. There's another player in there now. And also, I think important for really what we're going to talk about today is a book that I think it came out 2024, Todd, right? Embracing Alienation, which I think there's a direct line from the paper we're going to talk about today to that book.
For sure.
Also, and most recently, he's edited a volume with, is it Julia Reschi, called Love and Death. And he has a paper in there under the title Existentialism After Finitude. Okay, and we're going to talk about that today, following the theme that we've been doing for 4 weeks here. Also, I should mention that Todd co-hosts the Y Theory podcast with Brian Engley. That is a show I highly recommend to anybody who wants to get into cultural theory, and particularly Lacanian psychoanalysis or psychoanalysis more broadly. Very much helped my development in that area too. So pass our compliments on to Ryan. Right?
I will, thanks.
And now finally, I should note, fans of Y Theory will understand like how much Todd's given us here today, because it's Bastille Day.
Nice.
And I just thought this morning, it's Bastille Day.
It is Bastille
Todd
Day.
McGowan here, who is an unapologetic apologist for the French Revolution. So,
That is true. That is true. I go
Yeah.
so far as I am a Robespierrist. Like I'm like all the way.
all the way. Like Todd, but
Yeah.
Todd, you strike me as an all the way guy.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Much to my spouse's chagrin.
Yeah. But my wife would have similar tales to tell.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've embarrassed Todd,
Okay.
Jared, what are you reading this week?
Yeah, so this week I'm still kind of working on Elantris. I'm a big sci-fi fantasy guy, so I still read some novels, and I'm also still reading Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragile. It's my first time through it, but I've known about his work for some time, so those are my two main ones.
Excellent. Well, my reading project with my daughter to do Series of Unfortunate Events continues, and with the goal eventually of doing it, like basing an ethics class around that series. Also, and this might trigger Todd, I don't know, is
Wow.
I'm still digging Marcuse's Reason and Revolution.
No, that doesn't trigger me at all.
Really?
I love that book.
Do you really?
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
I'm reading it as like course prep to think of like ways to introduce the students to Hegel, and I think that his section on Hegel's logic and why it's actually one of the most politically revolutionary things that's ever been written, I think is very useful. So so that's good.
Yeah. I think he, obviously, I think he makes some mistakes later, but I think that's a great book. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. It's a great
Excellent. Good. Well, we can be friends then, Todd. Yeah. What are you reading, Todd?
So I'm reading two books. I'm reading this, which I think I'm almost the way through it. It's called Hegel's Welt. It's by this guy Jürgen Kaube, and I think it's so I think it's the best kind of biography because it combines. It translates into Hegel's world. It combines biography, like a lot of great things about Hegel's life that I didn't know, even with analysis of the text, and it's pretty good analysis. But one of the things that he said, which if people are interested in Hegel, they'll find this funny. Goethe and Schiller, who both knew Hegel, got together and they said, this is when before he wrote the Phenomenology, he's very young. He said, this guy's really smart, he's great, but he can't really articulate himself clearly. And Schiller has this idea, he's like, I'm going to take one of my kind of stupider students and get him together with Hegel and make Hegel explain all his ideas to this guy. And if he could do that, then but it never panned out. So that was kind of sad. The other thing I'm reading is Les Trois Mousquetaires, the Dumas,
Yeah.
because I loved Count of Monte Cristo, which I read last summer. I thought it was amazing, and I have to say, Three Musketeers, it's 900 pages. It's kind of boring. So
Yeah,
I'm a
it's
little.
a bit of a slog.
I know, and I'm on page 900, page 850 now. So I don't think I can finish it, but. I mean, I don't think I can not finish it. That was,
Yeah,
a, funny,
you're in.
that was a very funny Freudian slip.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would not recommend that book to anyone. But
I
Count of Monte Cristo,
read the
Monte Cristo is one of my
Monte
all-time
Cristo.
favorites. So
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
I read the Count of Monte Cristo aloud to my kids twice. And
nice.
I mean, it's funny because it's long, but it doesn't feel long at all, and it's just it's really amazing. But so I thought, oh, this is the novel that Dumas, as he was dying, held at his bedside. Like, so I thought, oh, this is going to be even better, and it's just it's not. The other thing, it's not really about the Three Musketeers.
I know.
It's crazy. It's about this other guy who's not even one of them. So I don't know. I don't know what he was doing.
Good Bastille Day reading.
It is. That's true.
There you go.
Except here's the sad thing. I had this in my hand, and I had Balzac's. I don't know how it's translated. I think it's called High and Low of a harlot, High and Low, or it's the Splendor of Misere d'une Courtisane. And I was like, which one should I do? I said, I'll go Low. I'll go Dumas. And so I would have had this great Balzac novel that I'd be reading, which would be more appropriate.
Yeah, it's true.
For Bastille Day. Yeah.
Well, thanks for indulging us with that, Todd.
Yeah, sorry for taking.
No, gosh, please. We're about dangerous great books, and I think we just talked about some pretty dangerous great books. That's good.
Yeah.
So let's do this, Todd, and because we don't know that the audience will have read the essay. Could you? So the title of the essay is Existentialism After Finitude, and really, you're trying to pull together things that normally are not pulled together, like to make friendly existentialism and psychoanalysis, right? So it's sort of you're trying to bring Compton and Long Beach together, right? Like and Dre fans will get it. Okay.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah. So can you explain, Todd, why to the uninitiated why that's a little racy to even be doing this?
Well, yeah, for sure. So Jean-Paul Sartre and he's obviously the figure that gave the name to existentialism, but all of the other even people that wouldn't think of themselves as followers, like Martin Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, Camus, Simone de Beauvoir, the one thing that stands out about them is a rejection of the notion of the unconscious. Even Heidegger, who was friends with Lacan, interestingly, you would think would be more friendly to it, but he was not. So I think that's the main thing. So to try, and I grew up in high school, I read Sartre, and that was my philosophical awakening. And then when I guess, I don't know, converted to psychoanalysis, that became a problem for me because I had this existentialist thing. And then that total rejection of the unconscious was really hard to reconcile. So I think that's the main thing. And the second thing is given away in the title of the essay, that existentialism is really concerned with our human finitude. And I think the idea of Freud and psychoanalysis is that, and I think this is the link to Hegel and psychoanalysis for me, is that our problem really isn't that we're finite, but that we're infinite beings, and that death is a problem for us, not because we're surrounded by finite beings who don't seem to be bothered by death in the way that we are, right? So the psychoanalytic idea is that the unconscious is a site of our infinitude, where it's not bound by the ordinary laws of finitude that bind our consciousness.
Yeah, Todd, is the title of the essay? Is it a wink, and maybe an unfriendly wink to Melissu?
Unconsciously. I didn't mean, but yeah. But it certainly would be unfriendly if it was a wink.
Yeah. No, I figured. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we'll come back to that as we get in. I actually think there is a kind of implicit, like defensive correlationism going on here in some way. Yeah.
I think that's probably true. Yeah.
And I'm with you on that. Okay. So I think one of the harder things for people to get will be what's meant by finitude and infinity here. Okay. Because it's definitely not quantitatively, right?
Right.
Right. Because on the one hand, and our listeners will be familiar with this, is like Heidegger seems to, well, not seems, he clearly thinks finitude is revealed to us by an encounter with death. So we sort of,
Right.
we realize the clock is ticking. We realize like we're like our ultimate possibility is no possibilities at all. We're like heading towards death.
Right.
And it shows us this nothing. Okay. So it seems like, and this may be unfair to Heidegger, which you have to be careful of that for him, it's a quantitative thing. That we're finite because we don't live forever, right? That we're mortal and we know it. Okay, I don't think Sartre thinks of finitude in terms of quantity like that.
I think that's right,
Yeah.
and in fact, that's the nature of, and it's the one critique. So Heidegger basically thought Sartre was an idiot,
Yeah.
but it's the one critique that he levels in being in nothingness of being in time that Heidegger accepts because he says, because Sartre's point is, actually, the clock isn't necessarily ticking down all the time, because right now, the disease that I would die of, could be the cure for it could be being discovered, and so actually, right now, the clock has been way expanded for me in a way that and Heidegger's like, I think that's right, and so it does, and so for Sartre, finitude is just a limit on our possibilities.
Yes.
And he has this conception of what he calls the practico inert, that by that, what all he means is it's just the stuff that the other way to think of it, he also calls it the in itself. It's just the stuff that we don't control, that there's a limit on our freedom. And so that's what defines our finitude, is that there are these limits on our freedom. And I think the way I would talk about infinitude, since that's what you're asking, is because clearly it doesn't mean quantitative, I'm everywhere. If I don't think I'm an infinite being, obviously, in that sense. But what it means is that the obstacle that limits me doesn't make me finite. It's not an absolutely limiting obstacle. It also impels me beyond it. And this is a notion, and this is what I should have said I'm reading, even though I'm not, is Johann Fichte's Science of No. It's actually a terrible translation, but it's in German, it's the Wissenschaftslehre. It should be like something like the doctrine of science, but it's translated as the science of knowledge or science of knowing. And his idea is that there's this great German word called the Anstoß, which is a limit or a barrier, that also an obstacle that impels me beyond it. And I think that's to me how I think of infinitude. It's this ability to transcend ourselves and not just be what we were given to be.
So we found. Oh, so go jump in, Jared. Sorry.
I was going to say, in the last episode, we actually talked a little bit about how, like, in a very real world example, is the genetics you're given, right? That even there's a thrownness there with what you're given to operate either as an athlete, or something like that. That you still have to make choices beyond that. You still have to transcend what those genetics give you.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Can I give away something about the new Superman movie?
Please do, yeah.
Okay, because I think this film is really concerned with this question, because he finds out, and they're changing the legend, because he finds out that his parents from Krypton have really sent him to colonize Earth and use his power to conquer the people and create a harem of women and create a new Krypton, basically. And
he's seen the thing and he doesn't like it.
Yeah, he hates it, and he's like, and this thing that had always given him comfort because the message had been garbled, and so he only got the good part of the message, and it causes him a real existential crisis. But I think it's right to your point that he realizes, I'm not just this thing that I was made to be, and I think that includes genetics or whatever, right? You have to, and I think oftentimes, this is what I always got upset by. I mean, for other reasons too, but. Do you know this guy, Larry Summers, that was he's economic advisor for Obama, but he's also the president of Harvard. When he was president of Harvard, he got in trouble for saying, just genetically, men are just better in science and math, so that's why they're. And then I thought, well, okay, let's even say you're right. That's no argument for why they're succeeding in that, right? Like you could say, like, as a society, men are genetically better disposed to that, so we're going to give more support to women, or women are more interested in that because they're not genetic. Because I was much more gifted in math than I was in anything else, and it was just was boring to me. It was boring. And I couldn't read till I was, I don't know, halfway through first grade, and then I became an English professor. So I think you don't know. I think it's like I think that's where I'm really Sartrean. And
humanities was your death drive, Todd?
I think that's really true. Really true. Yeah. Yeah. So, I should have been a good STEM worker.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about this great line in Sartre's, it's where it's the moment in Being and Time where he actually confronts Heidegger on death. And he says, we could be quantitatively immortal and still be finite.
Right.
Because it seems like we're finite for Sartre in the sense that we can't do everything. Right. Like there's a certain number of possibilities that are prescribed to us. And then among those, we must choose them. And then anything we do, it's always going to fall into this socially given role. Right. That's going to confine us in some way. But we can never really beat the big other for Sartre. Right. Like anything you do, you're going to fall into bad faith.
Right. That's why he thinks bad faith he's on the one hand critical of it. And I think you're right. People just read the critical part, but he also says it's not really avoidable.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He definitely says that. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I in reading your paper, Todd, what I kind of came with, and I can't remember if you used this exact terminology or not, but it seemed to me, look, Heidegger's encounter with death, what do we do? Like we find out that they self is sort of like, it's full of shit. Okay. And then we have we become individuated by that on Heidegger's account. I think Sartre's right that, well, everyone dies. So how does that actually individuate me? Okay. But it's sort of, we call the social symbolic order into question with the encounter for death. Right.
Right.
Similarly for Sartre, right. We call it into question when we realize bad faith. We realize that we've gone finite here. Okay, now, and obviously there's a very similar move is being made in psychoanalysis in Freud and Lacan, right? Okay, but what I take it you're up to here though is, okay, for Heidegger and maybe because I think we talked about this once actually, like maybe different on this. I think what Heidegger ends up is being something like Zizek's moron, right? And where Zizek says everyone's stupid, right? Like you've got morons, idiots, and imbeciles.
Yeah.
And so like Heidegger's like, okay, look, it turns out the they self is full of crap. Where there's a kind of authenticity, but then you can just go back to the village and own it, right?
Yeah.
Like you just go back and like become authentic about what you were already, right? So you don't actually free yourself.
There's not really freedom in Heidegger's story, right? I think that's. I mean, he does use the freedom, like he does say something like, you guys would probably know this line better than me, but anticipatory resoluteness, frees Dasein down to itself or something. Yeah. And that's made, but even then it's not, I think you're right. Like and I think what is underlying what we're saying is that the turn to Nazism is implicit maybe in the lack of a conception of freedom, right? Because all you can do is embrace your root, that idea of rootedness. Yeah. I've always found the real problem with Heidegger.
I do too. And this was like part of my own like self-analysis. Why am I so into Heidegger? Okay. Yeah.
Right. No, I think it's true. I mean, when I read Being in Time, I was just blown away and was totally in love with it. But I think that's something that Sartre does not share. Like
he does not.
It's very much about this uprooting aspect.
Yeah, and I think for Sartre, I think he's saying, look, we were never that comfortable in the first place, at least after Copernicus, right? We were never that at home in the world as Heidegger depicts. But then, so Sartre, like you realize, I think he's Zizek's idiot. Like you realize the big other doesn't exist, and there's no one running the store now.
Right.
And so now, okay, that's great, but there's no step into the infinite because there's nothing to ground your decisions on now, right? You fall into this, libertarian paradise or libertine nightmare, right? Right. Okay. And I think I take it what maybe in this what I'm reading what you're saying is, with psychoanalysis, you actually have one foot in something beyond the symbolic order, right? Okay. There's we have a foot in the infinite in the sense that we have a foot beyond all historically contingent social orders, okay,
right,
for good or ill, right.
Yeah,
okay. And so, am I reading right, Ty? What you're saying is we have a kind of freedom in the sense that we are free from the symbolic order in a way,
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No, that's absolutely right. Yeah, you totally read that correctly. And I think that, so there's a more, I think, rigorous conception of freedom in psychoanalysis to me, which is ironic because Freud thought psychoanalysis meant that there's no freedom at all in
Yeah.
the psyche. So
Yeah.
I think he just didn't see, and I think it's because he's operating with a very liberal conception of freedom and not a conception of freedom informed by German idealism. I think he doesn't have any real, I mean, he read Kant, but his basis, his understanding of German idealism is pretty limited, I think. So
didn't he like say with pride he never read Hegel or something?
yeah, well, it's there are two references to Hegel in notes in his work, and they're both complete. It's completely clear he never read him. So yeah.
Yeah. Jared, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was just thinking that, and part of what we're talking about here, right, is the experience of isolation. That's what gives us the opportunity to escape some of the symbolic world, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right. So the very thing that and it's not. I don't think it's a coincidence that certain kinds of therapy are trying to cure our isolation because it's the most radical part of our subjectivity.
Yeah.
The fact that we're not tied any kind of identity, any kind of none of those things. And I think that's why I'm a little worse than most people, but every single person, when they're in a group that they're supposed to be part of, they feel like they're not part of it. And I think that's the basis for our freedom. And I think it's psychoanalysis that really kind of gets that. And and what's fascinating to me is that it's through our not fitting in is unconscious. Because I think consciously, it's impossible not to be trying to fit in some way or another. But it's the unconscious that reacts against and tries to push us out. And that's that, Jim, like you said, that 1 foot in the transcendent, I think is
and it's a transcendent in an almost inverted way, right? Because it's a transcendence in the unconscious, right? And it
right,
yeah, like you're not turning this into Carl Jung, right?
No, absolutely,
Yeah,
right. And it's really good that you mention him because I think that's the nature of Freud's break with him.
Yes,
that he tries to ground this in something foundational, much like Heidegger. I mean, he's not far from Heidegger, I think, and it's not surprising, I don't think, that both Jung and Heidegger were in some way seduced by Nazism, right? Because if you're looking for that thing to ground it in that's foundational, then you're always going to be susceptible to some kind of fundamentalist or nationalist or ethnic thing, right? And I think Freud was he's pretty great in resisting anything like that. Even about Judaism, right? Like I mean, there's a great, I don't know if you probably are both familiar, there's this great letter that some people that wanted to found the state of Israel, and he's like, look, you must not really know me that well because I'm the last person you want signing this letter, because not only do I think this is a terrible idea to have a Jewish state, I think putting it where you want to put it is even worse than the idea of having it. So he was very prescient in his thinking about the problem with that. But I think that the Jung contrast is significant.
This was something that came up when we discussed the Heidegger Sartre contrast, right? So Heidegger at least on Sartre's read, that Heidegger sees nothing as something that you can contrast with being as a whole. Okay, it's this out, and so once you realize death, it's almost as if you get this I'm going to say transcendental perspective on it through the nothing, and that. I think part of what Sartre's saying when he complains about Heidegger is that, well, that's kind of there's sort of a apophatic theism built into that, right? That you're saying like there's still a stance towards the whole. There's still a no thing that's out there that we can like get outside of this, right? And he's reading mystics and things like that.
Right.
Whereas for Sartre, I think he's saying no, there's nothing. Like we can't. He doesn't. He even says like death and birth are inaccessible facts. Like we can't even really talk about these things.
Right.
We're just in the immanent, right? Yeah. And I think this is what I thought was really great about your paper is there's a suggestion here. Well, there's a way out of that box that doesn't then become a veiled sort of like theism.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Right. And I think I think it's through this notion that through unconscious, right? That we get to that point, and that we're not. I think what's crucial is that Heidegger needs to think of the nothing as totally separate, whereas he doesn't think about the way that it's already integrated into being. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something that is I think that's a very Hegelian idea. The way that he, even the very first chapter of The Science of Logic, it's really about that. Really, that you can't think of being and nothing. Like, to think them separately is to think just totally abstractly. And so I think that was really important for me. And that's part of what I was trying to get at in this essay. And
so help me understand or tell me if I'm understanding your difference with Sartre properly. Okay. And because it seems that, look, we all kind of agree that the Sartre, Heidegger, Freud are all saying, to use Lacan's language, big other doesn't exist. Right. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. But yet big other insists, right? You can talk a game about being free of social obligation, what have you, but ideologies don't work that way. They work in the unconscious, right? Okay. So in your existential psychoanalysis, which I'm not in Sartre's sense, in your existential psychoanalysis, how does the insistence of the big other work then?
Yeah, I think Sartre unfortunately has forced me to call my future book Psychoanalytic Existentialism, because
you're doing a book on nice.
Awesome. I have it's just it's one I'm sort of working on as I go along. It's
the master treatise.
This would be one chapter of it or part of it. But I'm sad that he stole my term. But I think isn't the key thing that for Sartre, one thing, let me just say, one thing I really loved about being in nothingness, and I'm sure you guys have already talked about this ad infinitum, is that the choice isn't this everyday, which toothpaste do I choose, right? That it's instead I choose my project, and then within my project, my choices are almost determined, right? Like that once you choose the project, and that's how we feel going through the day. Like, I don't think like, oh, should I pick up a book and start reading now? That's just part of that's my project, and that's what I'm doing. So I should say that I find that a really, really significant idea of freedom. Here's where I think that he's lacking. And I think it has to do with what I was talking about earlier about the obstacle, that I think he thinks that obstacles are just obstacles. And I think the great idea of psychoanalysis is that no, obstacles are also moments of great opportunity that actually give us our moments of freedom, not just...
The bug is a feature.
Yeah, the bug is a feature. They're not just the barrier to our freedom. That's what really drives our freedom. And I think I just saw this film for the third time by Akira Kurosawa called Ikuru, which is just an amazing film. And the guy, it's funny because you could really read it as a Heideggerian film, because the guy has an encounter with his own death, and then he starts to he decides to build a park that was held up within the bureaucracy. But the way I read it was, he encounters a barrier, and the barrier spurs him on to actually do something. So I think that's where I don't think Sartre can think that, because I think he's, don't you guys think this? He's fundamentally too liberal. Like his conception of freedom ultimately is this, even though I was saying this project idea, that's in a way an anti-liberal idea, but he's still caught up in freedom is just the freedom to do what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think he overestimates the degree to which any of us can honestly say, except from, kind of a rational reconstruction, that we consciously chose our projects too.
Right.
There's that. You mean,
right.
Or
absolutely true.
Yeah. Like I suspect my reasons for marriage were actually very opaque to me indeed. Right. And maybe continue to be, right.
Right. No, but which I think is but that doesn't make it less. I think this is a great point of psychoanalysis, but that doesn't make it less free.
No,
fact,
not at all.
That was the freest thing that you could do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
This is
things
what,
that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jared. Sorry.
was gonna say one of the things too that I think Sartre is a little bit difficult on in regard to obstacles is that sometimes those obstacles can cause trauma that end up informing your unconscious to make certain decisions moving forward in your project.
Yeah.
So I'm not real sure that we're completely radically free to make those choices moving forward, because sometimes trauma can kind of deter what that project looks like moving forward.
Right. Absolutely. I don't know that he even has a conception of trauma, really, right? Because it's all. I mean, this is actually interestingly, because you talked about Marcuse before. That's Marcuse's critique of Sartre. Basically, he's like, if the situation is too traumatic, what you're talking about doesn't make any sense. Like, no one has freedom in Auschwitz. Like, you could decide to revolt or not, but that's meaningless.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that's true, and I do think I do think that there's not really. I just think it's part of his whole resistance to psychoanalysis that he doesn't want to integrate that into. It's funny because he wrote the screenplay for John Huston's Freud film, so it's a very funny thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I would like. I mean, I know Sartre talks about this in Being Nothingness a bit, but I mean, I would agree with Lacan that like the very acquisition of language is traumatic.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Like, I mean, and it's a founding trauma that forever puts an obstacle between us and this infinity. Okay. And we kind of get it. We get closest to it when we trip.
Right. And I don't think Sartre has a very good. I mean, I think Heidegger has a better theory of language than Sartre does. I think Sartre just doesn't really have a good sense of language, because I think he's so. And I think it's hard. I think usually I hate contextualizing, but I think in this case he's so fighting against the structuralist movement in France and the attempt to destroy subjectivity as a point of departure, that I think that really skews his thinking. And what's amazing about Lacan is he manages to merge together that structuralist tradition and an emphasis on subjectivity. I mean, Lacan to me is a very Sartrean thinker. He's like Sartre and Hegel brought together.
Yeah. Well, and not Kojève's Hegel, right? Like Hegel.
Not Kojève's, even though he would have thought that. I think that's what's interesting. Lacan thought that, but his insights, when he's attacking Hegel, he's attacking Kojève in the name of Hegel. He doesn't even know that.
Was Lacan at those infamous Kojève lectures?
Yeah. Not only was he there, Jim, it's really fascinating. So he was at every one, and he had Kojève and a couple other people come over to his house every week for a supplementary where he fixed dinner, or Sylvie Bataille fixed. I don't know who fixed dinner. And they had a separate thing. So he was doubly invested in. I mean, he was completely. Kojève was his absolute teacher, absolute master. So it's really, I mean, his influence, not Lacan's, Kojève's, on 20th century French philosophy is just, it's incredible. I don't think necessarily for worse, except in terms of the understanding of Hegel, I think it's for worse. But I think I mean, his project of trying to marry Heidegger, Marx, and Hegel is a fascinating. I'm talking about Kojève is a fascinating.
I mean, exactly. And just in terms of the influence it had, you can't understand much of what went on in France in the 20th century intellectually without like getting those lectures.
I think he's the most influential philosopher of the 20th century.
And the one that no one's heard of. So.
And no one's heard of. Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't think he's the greatest, but I think he's the most influential. Sorry.
Going back to the notion of the bug being a feature. Okay. This is where I think, we've talked about this before, Todd, where I think like Merleau-Ponty is interesting. In that he has this essay where he's kind of putting Paul Cézanne, the painter, on the couch. Okay. Right. And Cézanne, was an amazing, impressionist painter, but was wrought with neuroses, wrought with all these problems and anxieties, and I think he was analyzed, and like everyone was then, right? And he attributed it to this like horrid relationship he had with his father, though he had a lot of paintings with his father too, which I think is cool. Anyway, and like Merleau-Ponty's reply to this situation with Cézanne is to say, these anxieties they're not getting in your way. They are you. They are what constitutes you as a subject, or I should say these neuroses, right?
Yep.
And like they're like because Cezanne was worried that like if he admits that his neuroses play a role in his creativity, then he's lost grip on the world. Okay.
Right.
And Merleau-Ponty's point is like, no, the neuroses are what actually give you a grip on the world, right? And I think it's because they're your feeling of bad fit with the social environment, right?
Right.
And then
Right.
thereby putting you in touch with something real. Yeah.
Right. Right. I think that's right. That anxiety, any kind of like obsession, hysterical response, like that. How you don't. That's. I think you put it exactly right. Like that's how you don't fit, and then that's what produces. That's how you produce the great work of art. I was thinking of when you said that. I was thinking of Rilke, who refused to be analyzed. So Louis Andreas Salome said, "You've got to go. You've got to go to Freud. You've got to be analyzed." He's absolutely not, because I won't be able to write poetry anymore. And so, I mean, and maybe that would have happened, but I think the idea,
because if I got rid of these neuroses, then I couldn't
exactly that was his fear,
Boom.
right? That was his fear. But I think ideally analysis would actually bring you more into that, and so it would get you so that it would maybe unleash some of your creativity. But I understand the fear, right? That you don't want to lose the thing. And I think that's actually what he was talking about is almost freedom in my sense that I'm talking about it, because he's attached to this. He understands that this thing that is an obstacle for him, that causes him suffering, is actually the thing that gives him his creative power. And I think that's really crucial. And that's again a very anti-liberal conception of freedom, because freedom for the liberal is about getting rid of all obstacles.
Yeah, I mean, in this essay, I liked, Todd, that you didn't take the bait of trying to take on scientific determinism, because that's not the point here.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's not the point at all.
Yeah.
It's interesting how, I mean, that's become much more popular. I'm sure you guys know that. I just read this Robert Sapolsky, Determined, that everybody.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. But, and I don't know that, you said don't take the bait. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's an unanswerable question, so it's not really a productive discussion. I just always think it's interesting. Why would you write a book on, right? Like that was just my question. And then he has all these proposals in the book, and I'm like, well, why would you make proposals? Because it's interesting that for the determinists, we're determined on a primary level. But then we can make, like, so one of the determinists, this guy Dirk Perebout, who used to teach at UVM, his idea is that instead of punishment of criminals, we should engage in what he calls punishment, because that way they won't be as, they can't help themselves. So we shouldn't make it so much so punitive. And I just thought, okay, but wait a minute. Aren't we not free? Like, why are we free on the level of what we decide to do to the criminals? So it seems like
exactly.
Like it's just such an obvious contradiction.
Yeah.
That I'm not sure.
Well, and there's the whole issue. Like, do you prioritize to use like the Salarzian language that I'm used to? Are you prioritizing the manifest image or the scientific image? And I think we have every reason in the world to think that the more ontologically significant image of things is the manifest image. And okay. And moreover, this is, I mean, whether it's the determinism question or it's the hard problem of consciousness question, from a psychoanalytic standpoint, it's kind of curious when people, I thought this is where you're going, keep writing books about problems that they can't solve.
Right.
Like if I wanted to give you, and I do this in my work on, right, if I wanted to give you an example of death drive in action, I would take you to the literature on the hard problem of consciousness.
Right.
Yeah.
Which are just books about the fact that we can't solve the problem.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what's fascinating is that problems that we could maybe solve or make some progress on, we ignore.
We ignore those.
In quantum mechanics right now, there's just like no theoretical explanation or exploration of what are just fascinating problems. There's almost none. And that's just mind-boggling. But instead we have people writing books on determinism. And I'm like, well, why aren't you writing books on, like, okay, are there many worlds, or
Yeah.
is the Copenhagen hypothesis true? Like, there's barely any debate on that. So I just find it fascinating where the scientific energy is placed.
What would we get off on if we couldn't embarrass ourselves trying to solve those problems anymore?
I guess that's right.
If I may, right?
Yeah.
So can I? Okay. So this is my maybe attempt to put Todd McGowan on the couch a little bit.
Okay. Good.
This is going back to the Melusu thing, and this is going to be a little in the weeds for the listeners, but I can't help but ask, right? So.
Okay. Have you guys done his book yet? Or?
We haven't. I think we'll do. He has an 80-page version of it. I think we'll do that. Because we're kind of committed in the show to like do things that we could actually expect the audience to read who have like day jobs.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
But Melusu wrote this very important book called After Finitude, where he's making a case that for a very interesting argument that our mathematical scientific concepts of understanding in the technical sense have to have a grip on the real world. They have to have a grip on the thing in itself. Okay. What I'm finding very interestingly in what you're doing here, Todd, is I think you're saying, no, we have a grip on the thing. Okay. Yeah. We have a grip on something beyond just our categorizations. However, it's not coming through these mathematical scientific categories, right? It's coming through this unconscious, and it's coming through the drive is where we're getting in touch, right? Yeah. Do you see what I mean? And so and I think you would probably still maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. Agree with me? I'm correlationist about the concepts of understanding in many ways, but I still think we have a grip because we can be undone.
Absolutely.
By ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Isn't that to me, that you put it so perfectly. I shouldn't even talk, but I think that's how we know, like, our failure to fit in, our failure to just go along during the day, all those things show how we're not just correlated beings, right? Yeah. Correlationism, I think, makes sense of most of the things that we experience, but then those things are constantly interrupted, right? Like my spouse and I, this is just a stupid example. My spouse and I went to Lowe's, the hardware store, and then she's like, let's just take a walk around here. We were just in Burlington for months. It's a nice place. And we passed 25 homeless people on our little walk. And all of a sudden, our whole sense of like what it was to live just in Burlington, like that was all just shattered. And it's like, it didn't fit in our correlated sense of the world, right? And I think
a strange world showed up.
It's a strange world, right? And I think it's a strange world, Jeffrey. I think that's Lynch would be the perfect example of someone who shows this way that we don't fit, right? In the way so I think it's interesting that Melusu was never able to follow up that. But he wrote a little book on Mallarmé, which have you read it? It's the craziest.
I have not. I haven't.
The craziest book. It's on Mallarmé's poem, A Coup de Dice Throw. And it says, I finally figured out the great mystery of this poem, and it's like 764. It's just a number. And you're like, wait a minute. The mystery, Mallarmé wrote this poem just to tell us this number. And so it's kind of crazy. So So I don't know. To me, that was suggestive of, and I don't know if have you read some of these other people like Graham Harman? And
definitely.
But I had a little debate with Graham Harman, and it was like we couldn't even speak to each other, like we were talking a different language. Because I just said to him, "Look, we're talking." This was when QAnon was really popular, and he just said, "We can agree on what the objects are." And I said, "Okay, is there a conspiracy of sex trafficking Democratic leaders, right?" And he said, "No, that's just beyond reason." I said, "Well, I don't know. There's a lot of people in the country who would think that's not only reasonable, that's one of the real hard facts you can bank on."
Right.
So we just couldn't. And he's like, "Well, that just doesn't make any." It didn't make any sense to him. But I think like even our experience of that just shows that the fact that even that kind of does show that there's this way that example shows how we do get beyond the correlation, but not in the ways that they think we do, right?
Right. And yeah, exactly. 100%.
Like when we encounter this crazy conspiracy that other people think, all of a sudden our own world is shaken.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, one of the reasons I really appreciate your work in like trying to achieve isolation, or to at least embrace the feelings of isolation, because we're so caught up in this left-right dichotomy that you have to conform to one side or the other, that part of this podcast is about people starting to think for themselves and get beyond the kind of cultist realities that happen in those places.
Yeah, I think that's so crucial. Yeah, I think it's so crucial that in both cases, it's the answers are pre-given, right? And the whole point is, I mean, I have my problems with Heidegger, but I love the last line of the question concerning technology, where he says, questioning is the piety of thought. Like, I really think that there's something to that. And I think but I do think you're right that it's in our isolation that that's where we really find what our own questions are. Because I don't think we even know what our own questions are, because so many things are given to us. 100%. And so it forces, and I think so much pressure is against isolate. I don't know, even from, you're, I think, younger than me, but when I was a kid, you spent a lot more time, and now it's almost impossible to be isolated because your phone is always, the other is always there with the phone. And so I think that's you don't get that many moments of that when the question or your question arises.
I think I take that last line of the question concerning technology as a veiled reference to Socrates. Who was executed for the sake of impiety, for asking too many questions. And I think Heidegger is, once again, I have this frenemy thing with Heidegger. Right? I think he's saying is, the most dangerous thing, and maybe this is a confession on his part, the most dangerous thing you could be is to become settled.
Right. Which is, but it's odd for someone who believes so much in rootedness to end an essay like that, right? Because he does really believe that all we can do is like accept where we're from and embrace that, right? So I think, I don't know, maybe they're just conflicting. He's at odds with himself.
Like the rest of us, right? In fairness to Marty, right? Good. Jared, do you have anything else? Because I want to respect Todd's time here as much as possible.
No, I just want to thank you for coming on. This was an awesome conversation. Really appreciate
it. It was so great. I would do it anytime, and I really appreciate that.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So probably there are viewers of this on YouTube who are going to take issue with the Bengals, I have to say.
Okay.
we're in deep Chiefs territory here. So.
Oh wow, you are.
I applaud. I mean, when I was coming up playing football, Todd, I mean, Tim Crumry was the guy.
Oh yeah.
So.
I'll tell you a fun. Can I tell a
by all means
story? Because this is just a total football. This is a non-theoretical point, but
that's all right.
So Dave Remington was a center for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. He was the first round pick for the Bengals in, I don't know, 83 maybe. And Crumry was the 11th round. This one they had 11 rounds. They had more rounds than that. He was the 11th round pick. And they were training camp the first day, and they were doing what's called the Oklahoma drill, where it's a lineman set goes against another offensive lineman against a defensive lineman, and you just have to beat him and then tackle the running back.
Most fun day ever in practice.
It's amazing. If you haven't ever experienced, I think they phased it out, sadly, because it's too dangerous.
It just gets people hurt. It serves no other purpose.
It really does.
Lots of stingers on those. Yeah.
It's a really bad idea, but it's great. So the Bengals put up first Remington. He's like their star first round pick, and they put Crumry against him. So first play, Crumry beats him, tackles a running back. They're like, okay, let's do it again. Give him another chance. He's the best center in the country last year. They do it 10 times. Remington never is able to block Crumry, this 11th round pick, and then he went on. Remington was not a terrible player, but kind of a bust. And Crumry could have been one of the greatest nose guards of all time, but he terribly broke his leg in the Super Bowl, and
a University of Wisconsin guy too, I think.
He is from Wisconsin, and when they had the draft in Wisconsin this year, Crumry came up and announced the Bengals.
Did he really?
Yeah. So,
yeah. Good. Well, Todd, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for indulging me that story too.
No. Please,
absolutely.
We once again, This is sort of dangerous ideas for washed up meatheads. So we're
Okay.
Yeah.
we applaud that sort of thing.
All
That's
right.
what it is, right?
All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks for your work, Todd. And know that we'll be following it. So
Okay. All right. Appreciate it. See
Appreciate
you.
it.
Have a good day.